Hi, I'm Dr. Jessica Griffin. I'm a clinical psychologist and I'm also the mother of three children. And I'm joined here by my friend and colleague, Dr. Heather Forkey.
Thanks, Jess. So I'm Heather Forkey. I'm a pediatrician and the mom of five kids, which means that a lot of the things that we cover are things that we may have experienced ourselves. One of those things is grief. I get asked not infrequently about how to help kids who are experiencing grief, especially when a child experiences a death that may be sudden or unexpected or happen in a scary way. Sometimes people even ask me, do children experience grief at all? Yes, children do experience grief like we all do. And sometimes they may express it through sadness, but they may express it in very different ways as well. Some kids seem to not notice and continue on with play and their normal activities. They may be processing it on the inside. You may see more subtle changes like withdrawing from social activities or changes in their routine, subtle changes in their mood. When we worry is when we start to see symptoms of what we call traumatic grief. When children become focused on the traumatic way that this has happened, and we see more significant symptoms in kids. Those symptoms can include things like intrusive reactions. Those are thoughts or nightmares, thinking about what happened in ways that kids can't shake or get out of their head. There may be physical or physiologic distress, things like headaches or stomach aches, or even having symptoms that mimic what happened to the person who died. There may be avoidance reactions where kids don't want to have anything to do with talking about the person who died or going to places where they may have been with the person who died. There may be negative mood or beliefs related to the traumatic death, not just sadness, but things like guilt or shame, feeling like they were in some way responsible for the death. And then we can see things like increased arousal. These are big emotions, things like anger or rage, or even risk-taking behaviors that may put the child at some danger themselves. Jess, when we begin to see some of these more concerning reactions, or even when we're dealing with grief just in general, what are some good ways we can talk to kids?
Great question, Heather. As parents, we find it difficult to talk with our children about difficult things, particularly about death, because we want to shield them from pain and painful emotions. But kids need clear and comprehensible information. Even young children need an explanation about what's happened to someone who's important to them, whether it's a friend or a family member. And it's okay if you don't have all the answers. We want to make sure we're still having the conversations. Kids need their parents to wonder along with them about difficult topics like death and traumatic grief. So, here are some tips that you might use when explaining death to children. You want to make sure that you're honest, giving honest and clear explanations for what happened, keeping it simple. For children, sometimes you have to repeat yourself more than once, especially for young children. You want to ask kids, what do they already know about what happened? Making sure that you're taking that opportunity to correct any inaccuracies they may have. When kids don't have all the information, they tend to fill in the blanks, sometimes in a way that puts the blame on themselves. So it's not unusual for a child to think that they somehow contributed to that person's death, or if there's something they could have done that would have prevented that person from dying or could bring that person back from being dead. So when you're giving that honest, clear explanation, you might say something like, let's say dad passed away, dad died. You might say something like, dad is dead, dad died today. His body stopped working. He can no longer eat or breathe or feel cold or hungry. We can no longer see or touch him. So it sounds kind of strange to say that, but we want to use language like dad died today rather than dad is gone or dad is sleeping for a long time and won't wake up. You want to be very clear with your language. And again, if you don't know the answer to a child's question, it's okay to say, I don't know. We still want to encourage them to have those conversations with us and ask any questions that they may have about the parent who died or the person who has died. Not being afraid to show our own emotions is another tip that we give to caregivers, because so many times we get the message that we need to be the rock for our children. But if we're able to grieve openly with children, that also sends the message that it's okay for them to grieve too and for them to have those big feelings too. And we want to provide that reassurance, letting kids know that they may have a worry that other family members are going to die too. So letting them know that very rare. Most people live a long and healthy life. I expect that I'm going to be around for a long time, and there are lots of other adults in your life who love and care for you too. Maybe list an example like Auntie Heather, for example. And again, there are lots of wonderful resources available to talk with children about grief, like books about grief and loss. There are also strategies we could use, like looking at photographs together or making some sort of memory box with a child. All right, Heather, anything that I missed here? I know that was a long list.
The one other thing I would mention, Jess, is that these conversations don't all have to happen at once, that we need time for ourselves to process what's happened, and giving our kids time to process what's happened is a good thing. And that we can watch for when kids are ready to continue those conversations and come back to it saying, I think we're ready to talk about Dad again. And let's talk more about what happened when Dad died. That may be enough for you and your child to get through these conversations and through this grief process. Of course, if you're finding that you or your child need more help, reach out to your pediatrician or your local mental health provider. Thank you so much for joining us. We hope this has been helpful.